What is your reaction? What is the impact on Europeans? You want them to spend more on defense,
Yes.
which they're agreeing to finally. But how can they do that when their economies are crashing and they are now
No, no, their economies are not crashing. The markets are reacting. No, their economies are not crashing. Their markets are reacting to a dramatic change in the global order in terms of trade. And so what happens is pretty straightforward. If you're a company and you make a bunch of your products in China, and all of a sudden shareholders or people that play the stock market realize that it's going to cost a lot more to produce in China, your stock is going to go down. But ultimately, the markets, as long as they know what the rules are going to be moving forward, and as long as that's set and you can sustain where you're going to be, the markets will adjust. Businesses around the world, including in trade and global trade, they just need to know what the rules are. Once they know what the rules are, they will adjust to those rules. So I don't think it's fair to say economies are crashing. Markets are crashing because markets are based on the stock value of companies who today are embedded in modes of production that are bad for the United States. We have to be a country that thinks we're the largest consumer market in the world, and yet the only thing we export is services. And we need to stop that. We need to get back to a time where we're a country that can make things, and to do that, we have to reset the global order of trade.
Term, and the other part of my question.
Well, the worst thing is to leave it the way it is forever. I mean, this just can't continue. We can't continue to be a country that doesn't make things. We have to be able to make things to provide jobs for Americans. That's it. It's that simple. China is an example. I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, they don't consume anything. All they do is export and flood and distort markets, in addition to all the tariffs and barriers they put in place. So the president rightly has concluded that the current status of global trade is bad for America and good for a bunch of other people, and he's going to reset it, and he's absolutely right to do it.
Let me ask you about also the predictability of relationships with allies. The Prime Minister of Greenland, the Prime Minister of Denmark, which at this point owns Greenland, so Denmark, a NATO ally, is saying that it's unacceptable that one country cannot annex another country.
Well, no one's annexed anything. It's going to be up to Greenlanders. The vice president made that clear. He's going to respect the self-determination of Greenlanders. So at some point, the Greenlanders have made clear that they want to be independent of Denmark. So that's Denmark should focus on the fact that the Greenlanders don't want to be a part of Denmark. That's what they should focus on. We didn't give them that idea. They've been talking about that for a long time. Whenever they make that decision, they'll make that decision. And then what we're not going to do is let China come in now and say, offer them a bunch of money and become dependent on China.
The president said he would not rule out using military force against Denmark, a NATO ally.
No, he said he would not rule out, no. He said he would not rule out, he said, I'm not going to rule out anything if Greenland is encroached upon by a foreign power like a China or Russia or anybody else. But it doesn't matter because Greenlanders are going to make a decision. They're the ones that want to get away from Denmark. They're the ones that want to be independent. Not us. We didn't come up with that idea. They did. And if they make that decision, then the United States would stand ready, potentially, to step in and say, okay, we can create a partnership with you. We're not at that stage. But that's what the vice president made clear last week in his visit there. His statement was very abundantly clear, that we will respect the self-determination of the people of Greenland. Here's what the president wanted to do. He wants to end this war, and he wanted to test it very early in his administration. Is it possible to end this war on terms that are acceptable, obviously, to both sides? Because you can't end a war unless both sides agree. And that's what we're in the process of finding out. We will know soon enough, in a matter of weeks, not months, whether Russia is serious about peace or not. I hope they are. It would be good for the world if that war ended. But obviously, we have to test that proposition. So we're working through that process. We had a visitor, that Mr. Kirill was here this week. Had a chance to sit down with him. He met with others. He'll take some messages back, and the message is the United States needs to know whether you're serious or not about peace. Ultimately, Putin will have to make that decision. The Russian Federation will have to make that decision. I think the Ukrainians have shown a willingness to enter, for example, into a complete ceasefire to create space for negotiation. At some point here fairly soon, not 6 months from now, the Russians and Putin will have to make a decision about whether they're serious or peace or not, and I hope they are serious. So it would be good for the world if that war ended. We're going to wait and see. The Russians know our position in terms of wanting to end the war, and we will know from their answers very soon whether they are serious about proceeding with real peace or whether this is a delay tactic. It's a delay tactic. The president's not interested in that. If this is dragging things out, President Trump's not going to fall into the trap of endless negotiations about negotiations. We will know soon enough whether or not Russia is serious about peace. If they are, that'll be great. Then we can move towards peace. If they're not, then we'll have to reevaluate where we stand and what we do moving forward about it. But we'll be in no different a position than we are today, or we were when he took office. He wanted to know early in his administration, is peace possible? We're testing to see if the Russians are interested in peace. Their actions, not their words, their actions will determine whether they're serious or not, and we intend to find that out sooner rather than later.
What about their conditions?
Which conditions?
They put forward additional conditions after you
Well,
had the Black Sea.
Yeah, so again, I mean, this is part of the back and forth of these sorts of things. I've had phone calls with foreign leaders, and then I read the readout, and it's like, oh, we said that, they came, they said something to me they never said. I guess that's part of the game in this place or whatever. But look, bottom line is, to me, at the end of the day, what's going to matter here is whether we're going to move towards peace or not. If peace is real, we will know soon enough. If they're not interested in peace, we will know soon enough, and we'll make decisions on the basis. I hope they are real. There are some promising signs, there are some troubling signs. It's not going to be easy. No one ever said this would be easy. But we're going to find out sooner rather than later. And let's just say I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful. I need to be hopeful that peace is possible and that the Russians are serious about peace. We want them to be serious about peace. And hopefully they are, but we'll know sooner rather than later. In order for NATO to be stronger, it needs partners that are stronger. Okay, the United States commits a lot to NATO and continues to. We are as involved in NATO today as we have ever been. And we intend to continue to be, but it has to be a real alliance. And that means that our alliance partners have to increase their own capabilities. So hopefully two things have led to that. The first is the war in Ukraine, I think, has woken up a lot of people on the continent about real threats and real war. And the other is, I think, the pressure and the statements of President Trump that have been pretty consistent about increasing their spending. So this whole trajectory of more defense spending began, I believe, back in 2017, 2018, under President Trump's first term. We want that trend to continue. And we're hoping when the leaders meet in The Hague that there'll be further and firmer commitments in that direction. I think it's beneficial to the alliance. The stronger our partners in NATO are, the more capable our partners in NATO are, the stronger NATO is. And everybody should be in favor of that. The only way a war ends in a negotiated settlement, if it's not an unconditional surrender, then it is both sides make concessions. We're not going to prejudge what those concessions are because those concessions will depend on what Ukraine will accept and Russia will accept. But we have to make concrete steps towards peace. What we're not interested in, and I'm not accusing them of this, I'm just telling you what we're not interested in is negotiations about negotiations. That we're not going to continue this forever. So none of it was threatening. I think it was more an explanation of this is our timeline, and at some point it'll be clear whether you want peace or you don't want peace. And that time is coming. It's pretty short. At the same time, as we now have seen, members of Congress have begun to file bills to increase sanctions. So there is going to be growing pressure from Capitol Hill to impose sanctions that we're not going to be able to stop if, in fact, we're not making progress towards peace. All these factors have been explained in the nicest way possible. Hopefully he'll take that message back to Moscow, and it'll make clear that we need to begin to see real progress, or we'll have to conclude that they're not interested in peace. But let's hope they are, because I think it would be better for everyone if they are. Well, we need to hear an answer to this. I mean, we're going to have talks as long as talks are about something. They can't be talks about talks. At the end, I think initially it was important to talk because we hadn't talked to them in a long time, but now we've reached the stage where we need to make progress. And if we're not making progress towards peace, then we have a set of factors that we have to take into account. But hopefully we are going to make progress towards peace. I remain optimistic that we can. It'll be hard, it'll be difficult, but I'm optimistic that we can.
Mr. Secretary, the Myanmar earthquake, I mean, normally in these kind of events, you would have up to 200 Americans with sniffer dogs, special equipment, experts in their field, saving lives on the ground. This has not happened because of the dismantling of U.S.
Well, that and the fact that it's run by a military junta that doesn't like us. So it's hard for us to move around in that country.
Say these events are always non-political. They went into Syria, for example, in the Turkey-Syria earthquake. So they can act.
But we're not the government of the world. No, we'll provide humanitarian assistance, just like everybody else does, and we will do it the best we can. But we also have other needs we have to balance that against. We're not walking away from humanitarian assistance. But again, I go back, there's a lot of other rich countries in the world. They should all be pitching in. We're going to do our part. We already have people there. We'll have more people there. We'll help as much as we can. It's not the easiest place to work. Okay, they have a military junta that doesn't like us, doesn't necessarily allow us to operate in that country the way we wanted to. That would have impeded our response no matter what. That said, we are willing to continue to help in the humanitarian crisis. Other countries need to do so as well. China's a very rich country. India's a rich country. There are a lot of other countries in the world, and everyone should pitch in. I don't think it's fair to assume that the United States needs to continue to share the burden, 60, 70% of humanitarian aid around the world. We have stopped. We are no longer going to spend $100 million to get $10 million to recipients. We're not going to fund these global NGOs all over the world that are living off of this. We're not doing it. We are prepared to help and work with governments and appropriate NGOs on the ground that are delivering assistance. We will be there and we will be helpful. There are a lot of other rich countries. They should also pitch in and help. And some of them are and some of them are not. But we are going to do our part. We're going to continue to do our part. But it's going to be balanced with all of the other interests we have as a country. We are not a nation. We are the richest country in the world, but our resources are not unlimited. They are not unlimited. And we have a massive national debt, and we have many other priorities as well. In the case of Iran, I don't know of any country in the world that's excited about Iran ever having a nuclear weapons capability. Some are more forceful about it than others. We've had talks about that. As you know, the president would like to figure out what's going to happen there, but he's also made it clear that there's not going to be a nuclear-armed Iran. That's not going to happen under his watch. I would say that if you're not coming to the United States to join a Hamas protest or to come here and tell us about how right Hamas is, or to tell us about, stir up conflict on our campuses and create riots in our street and vandalize our universities, then you have nothing to worry about. But thousands and thousands of people come into the U.S. every single day to conduct business, to travel, to do all sorts, to visit relatives. It happens every day. It's very commonplace and nobody has a problem. I mean, if you're coming here to create problems, you're probably going to have a problem, and I think that's a good thing. If you're coming here to create problems, not here to the United States, you're probably going to have a problem. Yeah, we're not going to continue to be stupid enough to let people into our country who are coming here to tear things up. Not going to happen. I think we're talking weeks probably. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen here in the next few weeks in order for this to be real. In terms of concrete, they've agreed to certain things. I mean, I think their things are not striking now that they were before. Obviously, both sides claim that the ceasefire is being violated, as typical of ceasefires like this. But that said, not concrete in terms of are we closer to peace? We're closer to peace simply because we're talking to both sides, but we're not closer to peace because we have a deal on our hands to end this conflict. But we're going to know soon enough. That's my point I make everybody. People come, oh, well, Putin, you can't trust him. It's not about trusting Putin, not about trusting anybody. This is about actions. If you're interested in peace, you stop fighting. And you lay out the conditions by which you're willing to end a war. And they have to be reasonable conditions, right? Not crazy stuff. Well, again, I get it. Then that means they're violating the ceasefire. That's not a good sign, But I think I would tell you this, that ultimately this is a war. Right now, things are going to be blowing up in Ukraine and inside of Russia because there's still a war going on. That's what we're trying to end. Okay, if we have a true ceasefire, which is what we wanted, a complete ceasefire, nothing should be blowing up. But the Russians didn't agree to that. They wanted a partial. And then obviously when you get into these partials, that's one of the reasons why we didn't push for a partial. We'll take it because it's better than nothing. But one of the reasons why we didn't push for a partial, because there's always disputes about what are you hitting and what you're not hitting. But in the end, this is still a war, and we want it to stop. The fact that religious sites are being hit, or energy sites are being hit, or civilian sites are being hit, that's why war is a bad thing. And that's why the president wants to end it. As far as them conducting another campaign, well, then that'll be a very clear sign, right? If all of a sudden we wake up tomorrow and the Russians are launching a massive offensive, then I think that's a pretty clear sign they're not interested in peace. That hasn't happened yet. Let's hope it doesn't happen. We want to know whether they want to do peace or not. And if they do, then there's a way there, and we're willing to help. If they're not, then it's good to know early so we can adjust our policies accordingly.